Welcome to Edo. If you've ever dreamed of stepping back in time to experience life in old Japan, then congratulations, because you are in for a rude awakening. This was no peaceful, harmonious society. This was a city of secrets, of rigid rules, and of deadly consequences. But it was a city under the control of the Tokugawa shogunate, and they ruled with an iron fist. For 2 centuries, from the early 1600s to the mid-1800s, Edo was the beating heart of Japan. You would wake up before sunrise, tend to your chores, and try to make sense of the chaos around you. The air would be thick with the smell of stale waste and would smoke. The streets would be a slippery, muddy mess. And every step you took, you'd have to watch out for the dangers around you. The slightest mistake could cost you your life. One wrong move and you could end up in a duel. And believe me, the price was steep. You might think it's easy to avoid all that, right? Just stay in your lane, mind your business. But trust me, it's not that simple. Because in Edo, the rules were made to be broken. And if you broke them, you paid the price. So if you think you can handle the pressure of living in a city like Edo, then go ahead, step into the time machine, and let's see how long you last.
The sun rises slowly over Edo. Its golden light filters through shoji paper walls, not quite warming the chill of the early morning air. You awaken not in a bed, but on a thin straw tatami mat, wrapped in a simple cotton kimono, if you're lucky enough to own one. The space is small, perhaps the size of a modern walk-in closet. Your whole family sleeps here, eats here, cooks here. There's no insulation, no privacy, and on humid summer nights, the air is thick with the scent of sweat, smoke, and the faint mildew of old wood. You live in a nagaya, a long, narrow row house, joined wall to wall with your neighbors. You step outside, where the streets are already alive with soft footsteps, murmured greetings, and the distant clang of a bell from a Buddhist temple. If you're a merchant or a craftsman, your day begins before dawn. You don't eat first. You prepare your tools. You check your stocks, but you don't stray far. Even if you were a wealthy merchant, you were considered socially beneath the poorest, landbound samurai. You knew your place, and your place dictated where you could live, which streets you could walk down, and whether or not you could wear silk. You're not allowed to. In winter, the cold crept through every slat in the walls, biting at fingers and toes. Fires were a constant threat. The entire city was built of wood. Children played with paper kites, their laughter kept low. Noise was frowned upon. Showiness was discouraged. Everything, even joy, was tempered by the need for order. When one home went up in flames, dozens followed. You paid your taxes in rice. You bowed at statues. You avoided scandal at all costs. Fire watchers patrolled the rooftops with bells and wooden clappers, but the danger was never far. You see, Edo's society was governed by an unyielding class system. The Shirokyo show, samurai, farmers, artisans, and merchants, in that order. And always, you watched your tone. If you met his eyes too long or too directly, you risked being accused of meshimori, an insult, and he had the right, by law, to cut you down without consequence. Your diet was modest. Rice, maybe some pickled radish, a miso soup if you could afford it. Meat was rare, often forbidden, and bathing, well, that depended on water availability and neighborhood rotation. If a samurai passed you, you bowed. If he spoke, you lowered your head. You prayed. You listened to the night insects beyond the paper-thin wall. That was the weight of daily life in Edo. But it wasn't just fear you carried. It was exhaustion. 12-hour workdays, 6 days a week. Sundays were for temple visits, not rest. In summer, the streets were dusty, alive with flies. Even the sounds of the city were measured, restrained. Vendors called out in sing-song voices. Shamisen music floated from back alleys. Yet, somehow you managed. You adapted. You memorized the rituals. You kept your head low, your voice soft, your ambitions quieter still. You walked carefully, in wooden sandals that left your feet sore, through lanes that curved like rivers, past tea houses, shrines, and markets. And at the end of the day, you returned home to that narrow space. You knelt, and you slept, because tomorrow you would do it all again. The rhythm of life in Edo was unchanging, unyielding, and deeply fragile. A single misstep could mean disgrace or worse. This was not a land of samurai fantasy. This was a machine, polished, quiet, and relentless, and you were a single cog within it. And now, let's move deeper, from the life of the many to the strategy of one man who shaped it all, a man called Tokugawa Ieyasu, the Ghost General.
Let's leave the crowded alleys of Edo for now and step back in time into the smoke-filled battlefield camps and moon-lit strategy rooms of late 16th century Japan. Before the quiet hum of Edo life, there was chaos. Warlords, or daimyō, battled for dominance. Castles burned, villages vanished. The world was in pieces. For more than a century, Japan had been fractured, a land of shifting alliances, civil war, and ruthless ambition. And then came Tokugawa Ieyasu. He was not born a legend. He was not charismatic like Oda Nobunaga, nor a visionary like Toyotomi Hideyoshi, but he would outlive them both. He was slow-moving, careful, patient like a river carving stone. His enemies often mistook his calm for weakness. At just 6 years old, he was given away as a political hostage, a common practice in Sengoku Japan, where alliances were fragile and trust was currency. He was passed between rival clans, raised under watchful eyes, and taught that safety was an illusion. But in truth, Ieyasu was the cold wind at the back of history, silent, steady, and impossible to stop. Born in 1543, Ieyasu came into the world as Matsudra Takachiyo. Imagine that. Your childhood spent under threat, every meal dependent on the mood of your captors. It shapes a person, and it shaped Ieyasu into a master of waiting. When Nobunaga was betrayed and killed, Ieyasu swiftly moved to protect his own. Tokugawa versus those who still served Hideyoshi's memory. He watched Toyotomi Hideyoshi, a brilliant general of humble birth, seize control. And again, he waited. He reorganized. When Nobunaga rose to power, Ieyasu aligned with him. Ieyasu saw the crack form, just a hairline fracture in the political armor, but that was all he needed. Hideyoshi, lacking noble lineage, could not pass power easily to his son. In the year 1600, that fracture became a fault line. He ordered every daimyo to build mansions there and spend alternate years at court, leaving their wives and children behind as soft hostages. Two great factions met on the fields of Sekigahara, east versus west. Ieyasu had planned it well. He had bribed key generals on the enemy side to switch allegiances mid-fight. When they did, the outcome was sealed. The battle was swift. 6 hours of confusion, betrayal, and blood. In the aftermath, Ieyasu moved quickly. He did not shout. He did not celebrate. He rewarded loyalty with land. He punished resistance with exile or silence. 3 years later, in 1603, the emperor gave him a title no man had held in over 100 years, shogun. But this, too, was calculated. He handed the title to his son, while continuing to wield power from behind the scenes. No one moved without his blessing. No policy was made without his quiet approval. But Ieyasu knew peace is not declared. It is enforced. He built Edo, far from the old capitals, in a swampy fishing village. He demanded roads, checkpoints, paperwork. No sword could be carried without permission. No ship could leave the coast. A resting place carved into a misty mountain, where cedar trees whisper his legacy to those who pass. No Christian missionary was allowed to remain. He slowly sealed Japan off from the world, and then he retired. Yes, he stepped down just 2 years after becoming shogun. They called him the Ghost General, a man who commanded from shadows. He outlived his enemies. He lived long enough to see his grandson rule. And when he finally died, he became a god, literally. His followers deified him at Niku-Chuji, a shrine still standing today. Ieyasu gave Japan peace, but not freedom. The machine he built would govern for over 250 years. Its gears were oiled with fear, obligation. and a kind of exhausted acceptance. And while he ruled with silence, his presence never truly left. Now, let us shift from the sharp mind of a shogun to the floating world beneath it. A world of tattoos, lantern light, and secret stories etched into skin. Welcome to the mystery of Edo's underworld. Let us now slip quietly into another corner of Edo. A corner bathed not in the sharp precision of shogunal control, but in the soft flicker of lanterns, the hush of paper fans, the slow notes of a shamisen drifting through a narrow alleyway. This is Ukiyo, the floating world, a hidden layer of life in Edo, Japan. Vibrant, indulgent, and quietly dangerous, you wouldn't find the floating world on any official map. But it existed, tucked away in districts like Yoshiwara. It was a realm of courtesans, kabuki actors, gamblers, peddlers. And it belonged to those who lived outside the boundaries of respectable society. Here, rigid hierarchy is softened just slightly. The merchant could pretend to be a lord, the actor could be a hero for a night, and the tattooed man, the outcast, could reclaim a kind of identity etched into his own skin. In Edo, tattoos were not symbols of rebellion as we might understand them today. They were more complex, both shame and pride, depending on who bore them. For criminals, tattoos were punishment. A thief might receive a black ring around his arm, a permanent brand. The mark announced his crime to the world, and even years later, he could be identified at a glance. But then, something changed. Among laborers, firemen, and gamblers, tattoos became a badge of strength. Imagine the back of a canal digger, muscles straining under summer heat, his skin a canvas of dragons, phoenixes, and mythic tigers. Ink applied by hand, needle by needle, a slow, meditative pain endured with pride. These full-body designs, called irizumi, were not flaunted in public. They were hidden beneath clothing, shared only in the communal bathhouses or among trusted circles. They told stories of bravery, loyalty, or a deep connection to tradition. Even today, the art of horomono, the traditional tattooing method, is revered for its beauty and craftsmanship. But in Edo, it was more than art. It was defiance, a reclamation of identity in a world that erased the names of the lower classes. It is from these majins that the earliest Yakuza groups emerged. Not yet the organized crime syndicates we know from modern tales, but loosely bonded gamblers, street peddlers, and bakuto, men who ran dice games in dusty corners of the city. They called themselves the Ninkyu Dantai, chivalrous organizations. And in some sense, they protected their communities when law turned its face away. They enforced codes of honor, however rough those codes might have been. They carved their roles into the fabric of the floating world, a world that knew beauty and sorrow in equal measure. In the red light districts of Yoshiwara, courtesans walked paths lined with white gravel and low laughter. They wore impossibly elaborate hairpieces and rich silk, but they, too, were caught in a different kind of cage. Trained from childhood, they served for years before earning the right to lead, if ever. The theater, too, was alive with shadows. Kabuki actors, often men in female roles, performed in dazzling costumes before crowds that came as much for gossip as for drama. Outside the theaters, fans traded prints. Ukiyo-e would block images, portraits of actors, courtesans, and legendary scenes. Some of those prints have survived, but others have vanished, buried beneath fires, floods, and time itself. And yet, their spirit remains, etched into walls, whispered in alleyways, and worn, still today, on the bodies of those who continue the tradition of irizumi. Now, as the night deepens and the lantern light fades, we'll rise once more from the alleyways. Our next step will take us far from the floating world, to the halls of power, where a daimyō begins his day with poetry and ends it in silent paranoia. Let's explore the quiet luxury, and constant performance of elite life in Edo, Japan. Let us now leave the woodblock alleys and pleasure quarters behind and step into a different kind of world, a quieter world, a slower one, but no less shaped by tension. Imagine yourself not as a laborer or a merchant, but as a daimyō, a feudal lord in Edo period Japan. Outside, the city stirs with ordinary rhythms, but within your mansion, the morning begins in near silence. Your home, though grand, is not built for comfort. It is built for performance. Long corridors of polished wood, mat-lined rooms adorned with scrolls and ikebana arrangements, guarded entrances and courtyards raked into perfect simplicity. Every gesture, every movement of your hand or turn of your head is watched by retainers, by messengers, by the ever-present officials of the Tokugawa shogunate. Because you are not free. As a daimyō, you hold power. But that power is carefully, precisely contained. By law, you are required to spend every other year in Edo a policy known as Sankenkatai, or alternate attendance. Your wife and heir must remain in Edo permanently, not as guests, but as hostages. This is how the shogunate keeps peace. You begin your day early. Before breakfast, there are reports from your retainers. Then correspondence, handwritten, folded in the style of courtly etiquette. Every word is formal, every phrase loaded with hidden meanings. You compose short poems, not because you wish to, but because it's expected. Poetry is politics now. Next comes appearance. You are dressed, not simply clothed, in layer upon layer of silk, each with symbolic meaning. Your family crest embroidered subtly, your hair carefully shaped, oiled, and bound. Today, perhaps, you will attend an audience. Or perhaps you will visit another daimyō, but even this is choreographed. When you leave your estate, your retinue follows. Dozens of men, some on horseback, some on foot, carrying banners and swords, not to fight, but to display rank. Every daimyō has a budget enforced by the shogunate. That ensures the journey from their home province to Edo will exhaust their wealth without breeding rebellion. This is no accident. Inside the halls of government, meetings are layered with formality. You bow, you kneel, you speak in practiced tones. Disrespect, even the smallest slip, can mean disgrace. But even here, danger does not come from swords. It comes from silence, from rumors, from a glance held along in a hallway. You are constantly being measured, not just by the shogunate, but by your peers. And so, your days become cycles of ritual, of symbolic gifts exchanged, of letters written with more care than most treaties, of family alliances sealed through arranged marriages, of banquets where sake is sipped slowly and laughter is carefully timed. Yet, despite all this, or perhaps because of it, you are deeply alone. The walls of your estate are thick, your movements are tracked. You are surrounded by formality, but little affection. Evenings bring their own routines. Perhaps you listen to a court musician. Perhaps you observe a no performance in a private garden. Perhaps you compose another verse, 5 lines to summarize a life constrained. You retire to your quarters, the lamps burn low. The sounds of the city beyond are muffled, and as you kneel to offer incense before your ancestral shrine, you wonder if your son will ever know a different kind of life, one with freedom, with purpose, with peace not born of fear, and so the day ends. The outer walls stand tall, the gardens remain undisturbed. But within, for all your rank, for all your silks and servants, you are only slightly less bound than the man who sweeps the alleys outside. And now, you may let the images fade, the wooden alleys, the rustle of silk, the clang of temple bells in distant courtyards. They soften, recede, like a tide slipping back into sea. You've walked the streets of Edo, bowed beneath the gaze of samurai, heard the whispers of courtesans and gamblers, and sat stiff-backed among power, laced in ritual and rice. For all its structure, its elegance, and its peace, Edo was not a place of ease. Its beauty lay in control. Its silence was carefully arranged. And its people, whether commoner or courtier, moved through life in practiced steps, knowing that missteps were not easily forgiven. But now you are here, safe, in the comfort of the present, free from the laws of ancient lords, untouched by the smoke of old fires, surrounded instead by the stillness of night. Let yourself drift. As the city of Edo fades into the distance, a paper lantern extinguished by time, sleep well.